Mr. Rudd, former Prime Minister himself, has put out tweets in the past that weren't very kind as far as his opinion of Trump was concerned. And that all came to a head thanks to a journalist asking this question.
Been concerned in Australia that it's taken 9 months to get this meeting. Have you had any concerns with this administration, with the stance on Palestine, climate change, or even things the ambassador said about you in the past, the Australian ambassador?
A couple of weeks back, you may remember that Donald Trump put out this Truth, as they call him, on his Truth Social platform. And it was a bit of a surprise to the markets. They were very surprised to hear that China had been, if you put that message up now, China had been allegedly putting out messages that was controlling the exportation of rare earths. And it was happening not just to the United States, but many, many nations throughout the world, according to Trump. And basically, they were trying to control the hand down and on selling of this product. So, for example, if Australia bought rare earths from China, then tried to turn around and sell that to the United States, there would be issues around that. And same with Australia. You know, if somebody tried to sell it as far as Malaysia was concerned or Thailand was concerned, and then on sell it to Australia, there was going to be issues with that. And that spooked the markets. Of course, the markets have a tendency to overreact, which happened at the stock market, and then interestingly flowed onto the crypto market as well, as those two markets become more and more in synchronization with each other. So we're seeing the old and the new start to merge. What's interesting about this is, of course, putting it in context, Prime Minister Albanese has been trying to get a meeting with Donald Trump since Donald Trump came into office back in February, and only managed to do that in the past 7 days or last week or so. And it's then brought about a situation embarrassing to Australia. If we have a look at what footages here, we've been talking about the diplomat that has been representing Australia in the United States, Kevin Rudd, and of course Mr. Rudd, former Prime Minister himself, has put out tweets in the past that weren't very kind as far as his opinion of Trump was concerned, and that all came to a head thanks to a journalist asking this question.
Been concerned in Australia that it's taken 9 months to get this meeting. Have you had any concerns with this administration, with the stance on Palestine, climate change, or even things the ambassador said about you in the past, the Australian ambassador?
I don't know anything about him. I mean, if he said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Did an ambassador say something bad about him? Don't tell me. I don't. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President,
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will. Go ahead.
There was a lot going on in that few seconds of footage. You see Albanese sitting next to Trump, and just big beam on his face. He's excited. He's in the presence of the president, and you wonder if going into a negotiation, whether he was a little bit too fanboy on that and a bit starstruck, perhaps. Then, of course, Trump has said, well, who is this person? So one, he doesn't know who the diplomat to Australia is. Now that has raised a few eyebrows as far as he's not making a bigger presence known in Washington, D.C. as to who he is. That's quite fascinating from that angle. Then there's something else that people have highlighted, that Albanese very quickly in Sky News's word, throw Rudd under the bus and say it was him who said bad things about you, and without hesitation. If we watch the footage again in just a moment, you'll see there's no hesitation or reservation there. And,
it was just instant. He's got a habit of doing that, though. Again, I'm not a big fan for blowing the trumpet for One Nation at the moment, but Pauline did that when they started talking about the $3 million limit on people's super. And then she just, Albo just kept throwing people under the bus. He does it to absolutely everyone. So I don't know how anyone is surprised that he's actually done this. So it's his motto.
Yeah, well, it causes a few concerns amongst his ranks, I'm sure, that, if you would expect the boss to back his people. And, there have been many calls, hey, we've got to get Rudd off the diplomacy as far as America is concerned, get him out of that position. He's put him there, backed him. Well, he's not backing him in this instance, and saying that. And then, of course, Rudd's response is, in the verbose. And this is a diplomat, and Trump's a businessman. And Trump wants a straight answer, sees right through that response and kind of goes, look, I don't like you either, and cuts to the chase. Now, let's have another quick summary of that. There's a lot going on in that. Have a quick look at it now.
Been concerned in Australia that it's taken 9 months to get this meeting. Have you had any concerns with this administration, with its stance on Palestine, climate change, or even things the ambassador said about you in the past, the Australian ambassador?
I don't know anything about him. I mean, if he said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Did an ambassador say something bad about him? Don't tell me. I don't. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President,
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will. Go ahead.
He doesn't hold back at all. It was something he didn't really want to talk about. Trump didn't want to answer how come it took so long. And so instead, he got the entire press conference not to talk about why it took so long and that, let's have a crack at this idiot Kevin Rudd. So he knew exactly who he was. I think it was Malaysia. He was doing a press conference, and he says he knows everything that's going on in that press room. So Trump actually addressed it in another country. So personally, I think he was just trying to save face with Albanese. He didn't want to attack Albanese so openly, and so he goes, you know what, let's have a crack at the ambassador instead. So he's kind of still having a crack at Australia, but he's having a crack at someone who's safe to, punch down to. So I think it was a very smart move by Trump.
He's playing dumb here, and I think that he could be playing dumb here, and that's an interesting play and a great observation that you've made there. It's just on so many different levels. It puts into question, and of course, Rudd's hoping that whatever they're going to negotiate is going to go smoothly. So it's like, ouch, as far as that's concerned. Let's have a look now at the agreements that they actually came into play and what's been happening, and it's pretty much in three parts. At least the information that's come out from the White House, as far as the American perspective is concerned. The Australians heralded it as a great success. But the American, basically they got away with what they wanted in terms of they wanted security in terms of the AUKUS deal, and also, of course, doing a big deal on the critical minerals. Now, the fact that China has allegedly come out and said this, or Trump had said this about China and the rare earths, opens an opportunity for Australia, which is what they've tried to do and put together in a matter of weeks. And it's in three parts. So the White House released a statement saying that the US and Australian governments intended to invest more than $3 billion together in critical mineral projects in the next 6 months, with recoverable resources in a project estimated to be worth $53 billion. And it was going to have also the Export-Import Bank of the US issuing 7 letters of interest for more than $2.2 billion in financing, which was unlocking up to $5 billion of total investment to critical minerals and supply chain security projects between the two nations. And the US Department of War will also invest in the construction of a 100 metric ton per year advanced gallium refinery in Western Australia, further advancing self-reliance in critical minerals processing. Now, interesting who's doing that. It's the US Department of War is investing in the construction. Yep. So that's really, really interesting.
Just a bit of a background on gallium. A lot of people don't know this. So obviously, gallium is actually a byproduct of the aluminum, if you're American, process. So Alcoa is the company that's actually been, I don't want to say being granted the contract, but they're the one that's frontlining all of this. I just find it really fascinating that Alcoa fired a heap of people from the refinery a couple of years ago, but now they're picking this one up. So I wonder how long has this deal actually been in the process of being made? Personally, I think this is an amazing thing for Australia. You're reopening a factory or a refinery So it's more jobs for Australians. You've got more industry, and it's not just, oh, hey, let's go get some raw materials and smelt it into ingots and ship it off. You're actually value adding a lot more with the gallium. So not only do you have to refine the aluminium, so the aluminium side of things is opening up again, but then you have value adding to the byproduct as well. So this is an amazing deal for Australia, and in particular Western Australia as well. So I don't think people actually really understand how good this is, like just the gallium side of things.
It's also diversifying in terms of our customer base a bit more. And I think we've needed that. We've been overly reliant on China over the last few decades. And now this is for Australia, putting it back into the perspective of, you know what, we're getting other customers coming into the collective here, and putting Australia more in terms of an international body and influence here. So I think, you know, it's good from that perspective. It doesn't impinge, but it's interesting. Australia again, it's walking a bit of a tightrope act between its alliance with the United States, but also wanting to keep the relationship with China going because it's a lucrative relationship.
I think with China, anything that interrupts their trade network, their lines, their processes, they're going to hate the whole entire lot. You've also got to look at how much of a stranglehold China actually has on critical minerals. So there's 53 of them, 45 of them can actually be found in Australia. So this is one of the reasons why China wants so much control over Australia. This is why they pump so much money, resources, and time actually into trying to control Australia. America doesn't have access to a lot of those resources, so that's why when you have a look at all the peace deals that Trump's done, like the Congos, South Africa, the one that's just happened between Thailand and I think it's Cambodia, like there's even more peace deals going on, but you have a look at every single one of these peace deals, there's a critical mineral resource deal done with it as well. And I think especially for the Ukraine-Russia side of things, if you want America to defend you without actually putting boots on the ground, put their workers on the ground. Watch how quickly they'll defend their workers, and through them, it's sort of like a proxy defense agreement. I think Ukraine just needs to hurry up and just agree to it. I think Russia needs to hurry up and agree to it and just back off and let bygones be bygones. Just let the Ukrainians be Ukrainians and just stop this bullshit that's going on over there. Sorry about the swearing, Derek. But this is an amazing deal for Australia because we get another major trade partner. It diversifies our sales because if China turns around and says, you know what, I don't like Australia, we want to put more pressure on you, we're not going to buy your gallium, or we're not going to buy your aluminium, we're not going to buy your coal, we're in a lot of trouble with that one. So having the option to go, you know what, China, you don't want, that's fine, we're not send it to America. And
right,
they don't have a leg to stand on.
And there's probably benefits down the line as well. And this is the one that brings us to the second point, which Australia's really wanted to protect, was, of course, the defensive cooperation between the United States and Australia. Now, it's interesting, the White House, how it's worded this, and I quote, Australia committed to enhanced burden sharing and is making new defense investments that will bolster the US-Australia alliance. Now, what is the enhanced burden sharing? Does that mean that there is a possibility that Australian men and women are in the defence force be more prepared to, you know, go to war, so to speak, in case something came up? Well, let's look at some of the specifics on this. Australia's agreed to purchase $1.2 billion in Anduril. It's an unmanned underwater vehicle, and take delivery of the first tranche of Apache helicopters and a separate $2.6 billion deal. Australia, since February, has been contributing $1 billion to the US government to expand and modernise the US submarine industrial base. Now, we've had that deal where ScoMo walked away from the deal with France and went into the AUKUS arrangement. Another $1 billion by the end of the year is due. And, of course, that's the deal that they're doing with the United Kingdom as well, with the AUKUS arrangement. Now Australia is also investing in its integrated air and missile defence capabilities. Now, that's interesting because I think Australia's kind of woke up and saying we can't just realize, you know, be the island here. The technology has now caught up with us. And so air and missile defence capabilities, $2 billion in the US companies for its Joint Air Battlement Management System. That's interesting. You look at the other specifics. The US-Australia alliance is securing a munitions supply chain resilience under Australia's Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance enterprise, building on streamlined export cooperation directly supporting more than 200 manufacturing suppliers in Texas, Florida, Arkansas, and Alabama. So there you go. There's more infrastructure going in. I mean, I still think that it's small money in terms of defence. It sounds a lot when 1.2 billion, but when you consider what other nations are spending on defence, it's it's better than it was, but it still needs to go further because I think the technology in the Australian Defence Force is way behind where it should be.
So one thing you got to remember as well with, even though we are not a direct partner of NATO, we're an ally of NATO, and there were certain conditions we were supposed to meet. And I've just got to double check the figures from memory. I think we only spend about 1% of our GDP on military and defence. One of the conditions for NATO was a 5% GDP spent, but I know it was really, really low. I know that was one of the things that the Secretary Pete Hegseth was really upset about with a lot of the NATO countries, a lot of their allies, that we just weren't spending enough money. The other thing is, like, for me, I've always thought our spending on the military was too low, especially with a country that is so prone to natural disasters. If the SES can't cope with something, who do we call? Not the Ghostbusters, we call the military to help us out. If we don't have the military troops, we don't have the reserves and all that sort of stuff, if poop hits the fan, like there's another Ash Wednesday or something like that, you need to evacuate a lot of people really fast. We don't have the military aircrafts, we don't have the boots on the ground, we don't have the skills to be able to defend home, like, disasters, let alone international. And we're always helping out other countries when there's tsunamis, earthquakes, typhoons. How often have we gone into Indonesia to bail them out? How often have we gone into East Timor? When there was the tsunamis in Japan, we were there to help out. Like, all these different places all through the Southeast Asia, we're always bailing out the other countries. And so I think it's high time that we actually did increase our spending on our military. Military and medical are the two industries where and education, I personally don't think there should be a budget on it. I think it should be open slab. Right, schools need money, just give it to them. If the hospitals need money, just give it to them. Like, it's, to me, especially in WA, we have such severe hospital ramping out at the moment. Like, we have the beds, we don't have the nurses to open the beds. So it infuriates me nonstop when you get politicians pandering about these things. No, just do it. So spending on the military has a flow-on effect. It's going to help the Australian people as well. When shit really hits the fan, we can always count on the Australian military to bail us out, and we can't because we don't have a big enough military. And that's my argument. So, your turn, Derek.
Yeah, well, look, there is a lot going on there. It's interesting too that Australia is getting involved in space exploration with the United States, and I'll get to that in a moment. But they're looking at the whole technology thing, and this is the third part of the agreement that has been made public. Prosperity and Technology Cooperation. They're basically driving innovation, economic growth, and technological leadership. I've been critical of Australia's lack of infrastructure to get into the AI sector, so it's looking to negotiate its way in the United States. Now, this is where it gets a little. Let's look at the minor things of this. NASA and the Australian Space Agency signed a framework agreement to strengthen civil space and aeronautics cooperation. NASA's Artemis program, which will return astronauts to the moon, will be joined by technology development with a rover from Australia. So it looks like they're putting wheels on the moon, and Australia and the United States and Australia agreed to develop and launch a bilateral technology prosperity deal to establish joint initiatives to cooperate in investing in AI, quantum, and other critical technologies. Now, there's more to this that I want to get to, which there's even more controversial point on this, but that's really interesting as far as technology is concerned. It looks like we're going to negotiate our way into that space as far as quantum and AI is concerned. I want to just look at this one. Obviously, we've known about the tariff deal where the US was looking to expand its US beef exports into Australia. And of course, US ranchers were arguing we need to do that. And of course, Australia has very high standards as far as, what was the word? Not immigration, it's the other one. Quarantining is concerned. Quarantine rules and laws and what we allow in. And that has been the argument. Of course, with years ago, there was the beef scares, that the mad cow disease beef scares that were going on. Australia really tightened up in terms of what it was importing on the beef sector. So Trump's been critical of Australia in that. So it looks like that's been a bit of a compromise. Meanwhile, this is where it gets really interesting. in far as the finance industry is concerned, Australia's superannuation funds will increase investments in the United States to $1.44 trillion by 2035. That's a big one. So your retirement money could, by default, investing into the United States, which is an increase of $1 trillion from its current levels. Now, that's huge for American business. The unprecedented investment creates tens of thousands of new high-paying jobs for Americans. Australians are saying, why is that? What do we get out of that? Well, there's two parts to this. One, you've got to recognise the United States is the biggest market in the world as far as investment is concerned and trading is concerned, which is why it makes it so attractive for fund managers to go there, because it's more liquid than the Australian market. And Australia's kind of shot itself on the foot in the way it's done regulation, particularly like the options markets some years ago, changing the rules all the time, so much that, every time they would do so, the lawyers would have to, in these hedge funds, rewrite the books and prospectus and change it, and then they change it again. And they're like, right, the lawyers have got to go back to drafting it. It's just getting too hard when the goalposts keep changing.
Yep.
These funds said, look, we're out of here because, you know what? You're a small market compared to the rest of the world. It's not cost effective for us. And so you can understand that. And what happened in the options market is it just, didn't have the liquidity anymore. The money just was taken out. Now, as far as money going into the US market is concerned, some have argued in the finance sector it's really not about that. It's about what is in the best interest of retirees or people who have these funds. What can we do there? And I think, exposure to those markets is necessary. As far as return on investment is concerned, it's only as good as the fund managers anyway. That's what you've got to bear in mind. So the more financial education you have, the more concerning you need to get on some of our courses here at Blue Sky Factory, because we talk about that. We talk about self-managed superannuation funds and the advantages to that when you can control what it is that you're actually doing. And now it's not suitable for everyone. You've got to get proper advice. But there's a lot of people who come on board and say, listen, we want to take control of that. I remember in the crash of 2007, 2008, many people bemoaning to me in those law, accounting, financial planning firms that I have to keep working now. I can't afford to retire. So they're kicking the can down the road.
So I've been doing a bit of a quick research in the background on this one. So my first thought, especially taking our super and moving it into the US market, into wherever else is invested, I don't think that's a problem, because it just means you're diversifying your risk. So it actually makes your superannuation safer. So I've got absolutely no fear with that whatsoever. So I thought, you know what? I want to find out how much is actually invested into China. So according to the good old Chat GPT, this is coming from the Australian Super website itself. Investments into China using our superannuation as of June 30, 2023 was 2.2 billion Australian. And that's just one super fund.
Yeah.
So to me, having all this money invested into one country is a bad thing, because especially with China, their property market is sus, their banking industry is sus, and there's not really many things you can do in China on the investment side of things. You either build a business, build a house, Chinese stock market. That's it. So there's a lot of issues in China. I think this is a great deal for Australians, because you're getting out of a country where the regulations is a little bit questionable to a country where the morals of the politicians are questionable, but you still have the regulatory factors in there. They're the largest economy in the world. You've got the volume in there. So I've been trying, because obviously I do some options trading. One that I'm really loving at the moment is AT&T for month-long options and cycling through them every week. This is not personal advice. This is just what I'm doing. And so what happens is with AT&T, they've got really good dividends, but what's a comparable company in Australia? Telstra. So Telstra, again, really good dividends. Their share prices, AT&T is just under $30 US. I think they're about $28 US at the moment. Telstra they haven't hit the $5 Australian mark yet, so they're very cheap stock. They're good to get in. Great return on the dividends if you're just going to buy and hold. But you know what? I want options. I want to be able to put a contract on and say, hey, if Telstra gets to this price, I will buy it. Pay me for that contract. Next to impossible to do it. It is so hard to have a minimum contract term of a month. The volume is minuscule. The premiums for those contracts, it just what I pay in commissions to get into options with Telstra. There's no money in it. There's absolutely 0 point in me doing it. So having that additional market where I can take my options, my self-managed super fund, the shares that I have in that, and invest it into America a lot easier. I just think this is going to be a win-win for Australians, full stop. And on top of that, the more money you make in America, there's more money coming back into Australia.
Look, I think we also need to recognise that the United States is also passing legislation very quickly into the crypto space as well. And that is a whole different industry. In fact, if it gets into tokenization, which it will, they reckon that that's going to be between $4 to $16 trillion by 2030. That whole space, just alone in tokenization of assets. BlackRock is eyeing that area off very, very quickly and wanting to get into that space. And that's where things are going. Does Australia offer those kind of opportunities right now? Absolutely not. Now, there's also the restricted superannuation. There's certain things you can and can't invest in, and some things are seen more risky than others. But I think it's going to change with the changing legislation in the US as markets move onto the blockchain more and more. The downside, I think, to this arrangement, Travis, is maybe it takes away some of the investment that would go into Australian companies now being put into the US market instead. Have to wait and see. I'm sure there's still going to be enough, but in terms of opportunity, yes, there's certainly more opportunity overseas, and it's offering a lot more liquidity in those markets than we would get here locally.
So I will throw one challenge to that statement. Is like, yes, you are going to reduce the direct investments into Australian companies, but how many of those Australian companies are actually owned by international companies? Like, let's have a look at Optus, another telco, is actually owned by Singapore, like a Singaporean company. Alcoa has American owners. Telstra, how many of their shares are actually owned by foreign countries? So FMG has foreign share owners. I just can't. There's not many companies on the Australian stock market that don't have an international parent.
And then you have the anomaly of BHP being on both the Australian and the US markets as well. So you've got those kind of factors to factor in. And of course, Australia's love affair is with BHP as far as stocks are concerned.
Well, I do have BHP stocks too. So they're actually doing pretty well for me at the moment. But again, that's not personal advice. It's just what I have. But I'm trying to think, like Spudshed, it's not on the stock market. So you can't, as a shareholder, as a self-managed super fund, you can't invest into Spudshed. You can't invest. I don't think Dick Smith's exists anymore. I'm just trying to think what other major Australian companies exist on the stock market. Wesfarmers, again, they've got foreign owners. So it is. So we've definitely got a delay going on here. So with Wesfarmers, anything that's on the Australian Stock Exchange, there's going to be foreign owners. So the revenue from that is just going to be going offshore anyway. So if the Australian superannuation fund wants to invest in the foreign stock markets, the revenue is going to be coming back into Australia. So I have absolutely zero problems with people buying on the New York Stock Exchange, on the Singapore Stock Exchange, the Chinese Stock Exchange, and bring that revenue back into Australia.
Well, yeah, it's interesting in terms of what will happen if the market isn't liquid enough on the Australian Stock Exchange. Will this make it even more illiquid? I think that's probably the broadest perspective here. But I mean, the superannuation industry in Australia is huge. They're talking trillions of dollars going at the US, and it's the money that is pretty much allocated for that, so they can forecast how much is going to be pulled out of the market as the population ages, and that's the of that space. And bear in mind, too, Trump has just passed legislation on 401ks, which is the US equivalent of superannuation, that they are now allowed to invest in more exotic products like crypto and direct land and stuff like that as well. So it's getting interesting in that space as far as retirement money is concerned.
So I find the American 401ks the flexibility you actually do have with them is quite amazing, and the fact that you do have direct control. You can put it to someone else to manage your fund, but at any time you want to take it over and I want to do this with my fund, as long as it's one of the accepted things, you can do whatever you want with it. I just find the Australian super is too heavily regulated, too many fees, charges, issues and things you have to jump through to try and do anything with your money. Because remember, this is your money. It's not the government's money. It's not your boss's money. It's not another tax that your boss has to pay. Even though it works the same, it is still your money. So you should have every right. If you want to turn around and say, you know what, I want to spend this money on my family home, I think go for it. Like, that is going to set you up in the future. That's probably one of the best investments you could ever make as a young kid. And I absolutely support that your super should be allowed to be used to purchase a family home.
I think it's interesting that the Labor government has been putting restrictions on superannuation of recent times, particularly for the high end. So if there's $3 million or more invested in that, then that's going to be taxed at a higher tax rate, 30% moving forward. Whereas superannuation has been always taxed at 15%, and then it's moving up to 10 million. That's, you're pretty much giving half away as far as taxation is concerned. At least they've had some positive news that the broader investment pool has widened for Australians as far as investment is concerned, that has that ability. And I guess that if people don't want to invest in that, they go to their financial planner and find a fund that doesn't invest in other things. If that's what they don't want that kind of exposure, they have those options. I think the frustration for a lot of Australians with superannuation is the goalposts keep changing and the rules keep changing, and they get nervous about that. And I think, that's a shame. If they had clear guidelines that, hey, we aren't going to change this, then, don't touch this, we know what the rules are, then Australians would be more comfortable investing more into the superannuation. But now it looks like, hey, you can look at it from both angles. Yeah, it's great, we're getting more flexibility. Or is the government now dictating to the super funds, hey, this amount has got to be now invested into US market, and that's going to come to the regulation. So it's a fight between the ones who control the funds and make decisions for the investors versus government wanting to do a deal.
So, time for a plug. So, a lot of people don't like the fact that they can't control their super. So, you need to understand the system you're in, how the superannuation works, how the financial industry as a whole works. And I cannot stress enough, yes, I have done Derek's courses. So Derek's at blueskyfactory.com.au. I cannot stress enough, especially if your kids are like, 17, 18, they're just getting into the workforce. Learn this information before they get too deep into it. Learn how to manage your money, how to save, how to invest, how to do all that, and understand where the financial industry actually comes from. And if you know that, you can make smart choices, because it's not just, you spend $100 I don't know, on a beers this week. What is that really costing you down the track? So Derek's got some amazing courses on that, especially Building the Wealth Foundation is the course that I did. That was the first one that he convinced me to do. It was amazing. It was brilliant. And I hated him because I've never looked at money the same after that one. And eventually that led to advanced options trading, which has enabled me to be able to be retired at 42. So, there's a lot of things that you cannot learn through schools. You can't learn through universities, and it's really important to learn it through people who have actually lived it, who have done it, who have succeeded in doing it. So do look up Derek, blueskyfactory.com.au.
Oh, thank you, Travis. And I think it's important to realise that there's a lot of people in the finance industry who don't know how this stuff works as well. And that's the big thing, because you get in situations where, I have had to educate bankers on the structure that I'm trying to set up an account for. I need it set up this way. And I've been around where my financial planner's been in the room and I'm trading the markets, and, he doesn't quite know how I'm doing it. The phone's zinging all the time, and I'm making money every time it zings. That's quite a fun experience as well. So, we do ruin our students for life.
Yeah. So the other one is because I wanted I don't want to say the freedom to do what I want. I just wanted the rules to stop changing. And because when you know the rules are not be the same, you can plan for it. You can make contingency plans. You can go, okay, I'll do this until this date, then you do this, and you rotate it to this and whatever. I couldn't do that in Australia. So that's why we had to offshore everything. So, one of the best things I did so far is obviously we now have dual residency. We're working on multiple passports, stuff like that. I wouldn't have known what to do or how to structure this without doing Derek's course. And like always, talk to accountants or lawyers who actually know their stuff?
One thing that really stood out to me was I had a mentor when I was working in radio. A lovely lady. She was the first woman who was ever on FM radio back in the day. And it was what I needed at that time in my radio career. And I remember her saying one thing to me. She was Jewish, and she said to me, Derek, you know what we Jews value the most? I said, what's that? She said, education. I said, really? She said, yeah. She said, it's because they can never take that away from you once you have it. She said, they can take land, they can take gold, they can take money and all that from you, but they can never take your education away from you. You always have it. And I think that's really, really important. In fact, I've had very smart traders and investors say to me, you know what, if I lost it all, I know how to get it back. I have the knowledge and ability to do that. And I think that's, for a lot of people, skint on is their own education and self-improvement. You're the one who makes it or doesn't make it, and you've got to consider that.
I have to say, if I got cleared out tomorrow, and I was living in Australia, I could probably get back to this position in probably about 2 or 3 years.
There you go. And,
So
and
if I was
to be
looking-
honest, I pay money on I invest in my own education as well. Right now, I subscribe to some things because, you know, it's specialized area what they're looking at, and I'm going, great. It helps me. I can take what I know and enhance what I know with the education they've got and the perspectives they have. So it's an ongoing continuum.
So here's another one for you. It would take me about 2 years to get back to this position in Australia. If I spent 6 months in Australia, then jumped back to Vietnam, it'd probably take me about 12 months. Just because the cost of living in Vietnam is so much cheaper than Australia. And also because of the regulation, the tax systems. And then if I, again, 6 months in Australia, went back to Vietnam, but ran everything through Panama, it'd probably take me about 9 months to get back to this position.
Well, credit to you, Travis.
It really doesn't take long.
Yeah, and
So-
credit to you, Travis, because you took action on your education, right? And you actually did stuff with it, and you know you worked hard at it, and it's gotten you results to give you the ability to derive income just by going online if you want it.
So the credit I have to give is to Luan for going, you know what, you're crazy enough, and you've proved, I've mapped it all out for her, did all the mathematical equations, showed her where the money was coming from, how much we'd need to live and all that sort of stuff. And she was prepared to go, you know what, let's sell our 3 properties and go. And that's what we did. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a fun show. It was a, I don't want to say how much we spent in the last 12 months. That's a little bit scary, but yeah, no, it's good. I'm glad I've done it. You can see how red I'm going, like a little bit embarrassed by how much money I've actually spent, but yeah. And it's really bad when you start, like, we look at all the costs of everything in US dollars now, because obviously when we trade the New York stock market, so it's all in USD. And so I'm like, oh yeah, you know, it's $100, it's not much. And they're like, oh wait, no, that's about 150, 160 Australian. It starts adding up really, really quickly. So yeah, like we've just done a couple of NVIDIA contracts, and they were like $700 a contract in USD, and it's like, you know, is that enough to live off? And it was like, oh, hang on, times by 1.55 to get Australian dollars, and it's like, no, that's actually like $1,200 for like one contract, and it's like, yeah, nah, we can do that one. So yeah, it was good. So it's 42 and retired, love it. Sorry, I'm doing, for those who can't see because my camera's still frozen, I'm doing like a little dance. So anyway, Derek, we are now up to 40 odd minutes for the show. We do only have a couple of minutes left over. What do you think Australians can expect different now that we've done that trade agreement with America? Do you think it will actually help to reduce inflation? Will it ease the job market? Will it ease the housing market? What do you anticipate to happen?
Well, I hope that it will create more jobs for Australians with the mine they're building in Western Australia, obviously, and it looks like it's going to be a long-term commitment. You know, just stick that kind of money in and you know walk away from it in 18 months. So it's a long-term agreement. The United States has been wanting to get their hands on rare earths for a while, so you can see this happening. And with more defence cooperation, there's probably going to be more opportunities for Australians to probably develop more technology in certain sectors, become niche in those technological areas, which again creates more innovation and jobs for Australia. So I think that's a good thing. I think it's also maturing for Australia. I think Australia is starting to look at itself and go, you know what, we need to be more where we go in the world. I hope that's where we that self-determination, rather than just, sell our dirt off. We've also got to look at the expense and the economic the cost of actually creating our own resources, the back end of, manufacturing aluminum and that sort of thing, or aluminium, depending on which side of the pond you're on. And we've done that, and now we're getting more cooperative with the United States. I think America is going to flourish. Billions of dollars that are pouring into it now, thanks to the tariffs. It's a great partner to have, and I think that's a good thing for Australia. And if we do increase our defence spending as well, that creates more jobs for Australians in armed services as well. I know that's a controversial one. I want the parents to work through the kids there, but again, the world has changed, and I think we've got to accept that. It's also, there are now opportunities for Australia to probably get a piece of the pie as far as AI is concerned, and the whole quantum computing sector, which we desperately needed if we're going to stay commercially viable globally.
Personally, I think we've missed the AI. I think we've left it too late. I think we don't have to piggyback off what the Americans are doing. I don't like the idea of piggybacking off China's, because I can't trust the CCP, and anyone who wants to release new products into China is very vulnerable to intellectual property theft. So I'd much rather partner up with America over China with that one. I think this is a great opportunity. Like you said, it will generate an insane amount of jobs for especially Western Australia with that Gladium refinery plant. And the cool thing is that's going to be south of the river. So people in Rockingham, Kwinana, probably northern suburbs of Mandurah, because it's not that far to transit from Mandurah, which is about an hour and a half from Perth up into Rockingham. It's about 40 minutes away. And likewise, southern suburbs of Perth, Armidale, Coburn, all those sort of areas can also migrate, transition south. I would like to see the refineries actually built out of Perth, say Bunbury or Geraldton, because we need to start moving people. We're too heavily concentrated in Perth. We need to start supporting the next suburbs out, which would be Bunbury, Busselton to the south, or Geraldton to the north. That's one thing I would have liked to have seen. And also Geraldton's got that great natural harbour, so you don't have to do any dredging or anything like that, so it's not going to destroy the environment. But the biggest problem I see at the moment for all of this, it's all great having jobs, but we already have a really low unemployment in Australia already. So you're making huge amounts of jobs in an already vacant area. So I would like to see more of an emphasis on housing. We need to get the housing costs under control. And I don't mean just like, I'll freeze housing price. That's just a stupid idea. But the government as a whole needs to start releasing more property. Now, if you build that gallium plant, so let's say you do build it in Busselton, all right, let's say you need 10,000 workers. Fantastic. Go build 10,000 houses in Busselton. Start migrating some of the people out of Perth into those areas. That's not free up houses in Perth, which means, you're putting more houses onto the market, drops the prices a little bit of short-term pain. When you look at years long, it's much more stable, much more easier to handle. It also resolves the pressure on the infrastructure, schooling, hospitals, police resources, fire department, all of that. It just really, really helps out across the board. So that's what I'd love to see happen, is people moving out of Perth to free up some more resources.
And you've got the flow-on effect as well. We've got the infrastructure around there. But yeah, it's great for the economy if more money is being poured in, our services are being bought. It's good.
Taz also just said cut Airbnbs in half, more houses, tell people to stop being fussy with jobs, more jobs. At the moment, it's just the housing market, there's so many jobs available for so few people, but we can't get more people in because they've got nowhere to live already. So it's like one of those places where we really need to focus on houses. We need houses. Like I cannot stress how important houses are. So you don't have to build them in Perth. You can build them in the outer suburbs, or even like go to the next couple of suburbs across, but we need houses, and the government just doesn't want to do it. But all in all, I think this trade deal is actually, there's more positive for Australia than negative. And I think it's going to take about 5 years for it to really kick in. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, you've got to build that infrastructure first, and that's what they're doing.
So let's wrap this one up, and we will see you next week. And also don't forget to check out Freedom Fridays, where we get all the updates from the US with Dr. Dan Worthington as well. So they'll be airing on Friday and over the weekend. So, Derek, thanks for your time again, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Travis.